This is a lecture from Open Tuition. To benefit from the lecture, you should download the free lecture notes from opentuition.com.
So let's move on then to the next section. Default surcharge. This is one of the examiner's favourite little topics, because again it requires you to learn rules and to apply them, and there's lots of dates involved, which obviously sometimes confuses students. So this is something that I think it's very important, that in one of the important topics in the chapter. There are some things that are more important than others, but this is one of the important ones. So if you remember, we've just discussed about the fact that it's important to submit your return online and to pay within the correct time. If you don't, then you will get penalties. Now, it's a new penalty system introduced some time ago. It talks about it being a new penalty because they keep tweaking it and making it slightly different. Now, this default surcharge. A default means you've obviously done something incorrect. It recurs if it's not submitted on time and or you make your payment late. Okay, so remember it was 1 month and 7 days. So the first default, the first time you do that and you don't send it in on time, or you send it in on time and don't pay it, they issue what's known as a surcharge liability notice. It specifies the period, which would be 12 months, the start date and the end date. Okay, you have then got to submit 4 returns on the correct date and make your payment on the correct date. So consequences. If this is what happens when your surcharge notice is issued, it extends for 12 months, which covers 4 quarters. Okay. Then if it involves late payment, then you will be subject to a surcharge penalty. These are the rates. They will be given to you in your exam. Please make sure you're aware of them. So the first surcharge period, the default in that surcharge period. So you missed one and it starts on the 1st of June, say 22, and it goes to the 1st of June 23. If during that period of time you make a default and it involves non-payment of tax, you'll be charged 2% on the VAT unpaid. If you keep doing it, obviously the percentages will go up. Now, if it's less than £400, you don't have to pay it. Okay, less than £400. Let's have a look at this example, which shows how this works. So remember the rule. 1 month and 7 days to file online and make payment. So what I'd like you to do now is just pause this and have a look at this question and decide whether or not each one of those was filed on time. Okay, you ready to pause? And pause. Okay, so you should have paused. Hopefully you have done. All right, let's have a look. So 30th of September 2021. What was the date it should have been paid? It should have been paid by the 7th of November. Therefore, it is late. So a surcharge notice will be issued which extends to, including 1, 2, 3, 4 quarters. So the liability notice has been issued. The next payment, the next quarter, is the 31st of December. When should it have been paid? Well, it should have been paid by the 7th of February. Come on, people, get your act together. That's late. So the surcharge, first consequence is the surcharge liability notice is extended. So first consequence, extend the surcharge liability notice to the end of December 22 to give them the opportunity to send in 1, 2, 3, 4 correct returns at the correct time and pay the tax. Now, this VAT was not paid. Therefore, there will be, I'm just going to move the page up, a surcharge of 2%. A 2% surcharge will be added to that. Okay. 31st of March, this isn't going well. 31st of March should be paid by 5th of May. Hooray, they paid it on time. 30th of June. Hooray, they paid it on time. September. Hooray, they paid it on time. And they paid that one. Excellent. All clear. 4 quarters, all paid on time and submitted on time. The surcharge liability notice is removed. Excellent. Revenue will be happy. The quarter ended 31st of March 2023 was submitted on the 16th of May. It was late. It was late. They didn't pay it on time. Therefore, a surcharge liability notice will be issued and they are back where they started. So if you get a question like that and you can see that perhaps coming on, you need to remember the rule. That's the first thing. And then when should it have been paid? Work out whether they have been. So those 2 weren't. Those 4 were. And that wasn't. That's your first thing. When is the surcharge liability? Surcharge liability notice issued? When does it end? And what happens in between times? Now, I've mentioned also other penalties and interest. If you fail to notify for registration or you change the nature of your supplies, then there are penalties. Now, this is a universal penalty scheme. No penalty where you have reasonable excuse. 30% non-deliberate. 70% deliberate. And 100% deliberate failure to notify with concealment. In other words, you hid it. Okay. So this one is not hidden. Remember those, because that could be a multiple choice question. Look at this. Don't worry about it. It's in the rates, in the exam. Always check, please. Never guess. Now, there can be errors sometimes on a return. People are fallible. They didn't correctly add it up. They missed something. Okay. If you make an error on the return that results in an underpayment, this can be subject to a standard penalty for submission of an incorrect return, and there will be interest charges. 3 situations. Net errors of less than the de minimis, which we've got down here, can be voluntarily disclosed by the trader. You simply enter the errors on the next VAT return. Maybe a penalty for submission of an incorrect return, but no interest charged. You volunteered, okay? Especially if it's less than this de minimis. Now, this de minimis, we'll just have a look at that. Let's just have a look at that quickly. It's the greater of £10,000 or 1% of the turnover, subject to an upper limit of £50,000. Okay, that's the rule. Now you have to remember that one. Net errors of more than the de minimis, so that's less than, this is more than, you can again voluntarily disclose. Now these must be sent separately. Don't put them on the next return. Okay, interest will be charged and there may be a penalty. You can argue that one way or the other. You can argue penalties down, and in any situation I would strongly advise. I've had that with a client of mine in the past where we've argued the penalty down. The revenue will always go for 100%, that you deliberately hid it, you deliberately didn't put it on, and you were never going to tell us. So argue the penalty down. Okay, now the third situation is the errors may be discovered as a result of a control visit. In other words, you didn't even know you'd made an error. So you'll get a penalty and interest if that is the case. This de minimis limit here, we're going to have a look at on the next page, where we're going to have a look at it in example number 7. Now, if there is a submission of an incorrect return that leads to an understatement of VAT or a failure of inflated claim for it, so in other words, you haven't paid sufficient, you haven't paid enough, or you claimed too much, again, penalties. Okay. So no penalty if you make a simple mistake, and don't forget, if it's below the de minimis level, below de minimis, then you put it on the VAT return. Above the de minimis, then you have to notify them. 30% if you fail to take reasonable care. They will determine what reasonable care is. 70% if it's deliberate, in other words, you just didn't put it on or you claimed too much on purpose. 100% if it was deliberate and you concealed it, you hid it. And again, it's provided for you in an exam, which is good, which means you don't have to remember it. So Blanche made an error to understated her output VAT of £8,500 on the VAT return for the quarter of December 22. Turnover for the quarter was 700,000. Do you remember the rule from earlier? It's the greater of £10,000 or 1% of turnover. Okay, which is 7,000. So it's the greater of those two, which means we'll choose that one. Okay, that's the de minimis. So that's your de minimis level. Oops. That's your de minimis level. It was less than, because you remember what it was? It was only 8.5, wasn't it? So we can therefore disclose it on the next return. There will be no interest. You may get a penalty, probably 30% of 8,500, which is 2,550, because you failed to take reasonable care.